and welcome to your October 2020 episode of Sunday Sit-Downs, the show where anything goes and nothing is left behind. As always, I am Steve, your friendly neighborhood lawn gnome, and I am very glad to be back with another great topic of discussion, and as always, another great YouTuber to discuss it with. But at the same time, I'm sort of feeling a little bit sad because this is one of the last 3 episodes of Sunday Sit-Downs ever. I cannot believe the fact that we are ending 2020 so soon, yet many of us are surprised that it took this long based on everything that's been going on. But anyway, I want to make sure that the last 3 episodes of Sunday Sit Down really does count. So I've got a wonderful topic to discuss with you guys, as it is a topic that couldn't be more of an appropriate thing for me and my channel right now, because just last month I did something that took 7 years to do, and that was to watch and review all current 58 animated classics from the wonderful world of Disney. And Disney is a subject that's been everywhere these days, from just conversations with friends to even with the current situation on the news. So to join me is a YouTuber who I truly appreciate and respect. When she heard that this year was going to be my last year in my current format on my channel, she immediately commented and saying, "I cannot believe that we haven't done a project together." Well, let's just say that her wish has been granted today. She is Cara from the channel Wilde Book Garden. Cara, good morning to you, because I know it's still morning by you. Thank you so much for joining me on my show today. I'm so glad to have you here finally.
I know. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited about this.
Yeah, as am I, because like I said earlier, the topic of Disney is definitely something that I'm talking about with a lot of people. And even though it's sort of a mixed bag these days among so many people, there's no reason to deny the fact that Disney is a namesake that is just something that makes childhood childhood. And it's been that way for almost a century. It's quite amazing to believe that. So, as always, I have 7 questions for my guest, and I'm really excited for each and every one of these because it's really going to capture all that is Disney, past, present, and possibly even future. But speaking of those 3 time frames, with question number 1, we always go and begin at the beginning. So, Cara, the first question that I want to ask you is, what was your very first exposure to Disney, and can you remember the very first Disney film, whether it was Canon Classics or if it was even a Pixar film? What was the very first one that you ever saw, and can you remember the first one that you saw in theaters?
Okay, so I think the very first Disney movie I saw was probably the Winnie the Pooh animated one, where they combined, I think they did like multiple stories in one, because I remember being very upset at how they treated Tigger at the end of that movie.
Aww.
I have very, very clear memories of being just distraught watching that movie when I was little. But I think that was definitely one of the first, and I think I even watched that one before like kind of the original classics, you know, like Snow White and Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty. I definitely watched those, but I think Winnie the Pooh was even before that. And then as far as in theaters, I'm pretty sure that my first Disney or Pixar movie I saw was Monsters, Inc. Weirdly enough, when I was trying to think of the answer to this question, I don't remember seeing nearly as many Disney movies in theaters as Pixar movies for whatever reason. Those were the ones that we usually saw in theaters. But yeah, I think that was Monsters, Inc., which was in 2001.
That's correct, yeah. I still remember actually going with my friend to see Monsters, Inc. in theaters, and he wasn't interested in seeing Monsters, Inc. in the slightest, but we both were actually going because we knew that that was the movie in which the trailer for Star Wars Episode 2 was actually going to be featured with. So we were all excited to see that. But I love Pixar movies. I really, really do. I'm actually always happy to brag a little bit in regards to my Disney know-how, saying that I have seen every single Pixar film in theaters since the original Toy Story. So I've seen them all. So even though I'm a little upset with the news that came out just a few days ago about Soul coming to Disney Plus, it's still not going to break my streak because it is not going to theaters. But I am a
Right.
little upset that I'll be missing it because I really do want to see that movie, and I'm not really someone who's interested in purchasing Disney Plus, but that's another topic that we'll actually get onto a little bit later. But now the first Disney movie that I saw, and also The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, that is just pure innocence. It's one of my personal favorites, and I'm actually glad that it's one of the few Disney classics to actually get a sequel. Winnie the Pooh, which came out in like 2011, I believe, is not as good as the original, but it's still fun. I love it. I love it so much. But I think the first Disney movie that I ever saw was the 1973 film Robin Hood. It could have been Pinocchio, though. I'm not exactly sure. I do know that Pinocchio, Robin Hood, and Alice in Wonderland are the first three Disney classics I ever saw, ever. And Robin Hood was just such a fun movie. I still love it to this very day.
I love that one.
It's just pure adventure. That's what I love so much about that one. And I also love the music. It's great. It's such a fun movie.
Yeah.
The first one that I ever actually saw in theaters was actually going back to a time when Disney classics were actually re-released in movie theaters for limited time, so younger generations could actually see all of these great films that basically started being created in the late 1930s on the big screen. So the very first Disney film I ever saw in theaters was 101 Dalmatians. My dad took me and my brother to see that movie. That's also still a film that holds a very special place in my heart. I really do love that movie to death. But that's basically where my humble beginnings of Disney started, and now it's turned into this gargantuan monster, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, in regards to the second question, this is where we could probably get into some real good reasons. What is your favorite Disney Canon Classic and favorite Disney Pixar film of all time?
I think I'm gonna have to be kind of basic for Canon Classic, and I gotta give it to Beauty and the Beast.
That's a
I
great
just
one.
feel like that one has really stood the test of time in so many ways. I think the music is beautiful, of course. I love the story. I really like how, like, I know that Disney has over the years gotten some criticism for how they structure their princess movies, which I can definitely understand. But I really love how in Beauty and the Beast, the story is not about thinking that you can change somebody. It's about somebody deciding to change before, like, the Beast has to make himself a better person and realize that he's been doing things wrong long before Belle cares about him at all. And I think that's really important, and I think that makes it really satisfying to see that character arc. I think the animation is lovely. Like, I just think it's a classic for a reason, and it's one that I still love watching. So Beauty and the Beast is probably my answer for that.
There's no
And
reason why I would deny that.
yeah,
That's one of the most beautiful and most perfect Disney classics of all time. And I mean, it is the very first animated movie to ever get nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars.
right. Hard to beat that.
Although if it wasn't for Silence of the Lambs to come out in that exact same year, I really think that Beauty and the Beast could have actually taken Best Picture.
And as for favorite Pixar, I think, okay, so this is after Disney had like officially bought Pixar. So technically, I think this is Disney slash Pixar. But I have to say, Coco, I love that movie so much. I have seen it at least 3 times now. And like every time I see it, I'm like, I'm not going to cry this time because I know what's coming. And I cry anyway. But again, it's like the story just means so much. I love that it's about not just the main character like learning and changing and growing, but kind of his family meeting him halfway and realizing that what he wants is important, and that you can follow your dreams and do what you want to do while not losing sight of your family. I think the animation is gorgeous. I love the setting. I thought the cast was like brilliant. And I just love how attached I got to all of the characters, like the side characters, and even the ones who only have a few lines in the movie. I was very invested in them, and I wanted them to be okay. I wanted to see what was going to happen for them. I just think that Coco is a really beautiful movie. I think that even on rewatching, it has such an emotional impact. Um, and yeah, I adore that movie.
Oh, those are two excellent choices. Well, first of all, in regards to Coco, my wife and I are the biggest fans of Dante the dog. We love Dante to death. He is
Dante's great.
wonderful. But no, we love Coco so much, and that was such a breath of fresh air to arrive when it actually did come out on the big screen, because at that time we were really seeing a lull in Pixar's films because it was all just a bunch of sequels.
Yeah.
And even the brand new original title that came out around those few years, which was The Good Dinosaur. Some people love it, some people hate it. We hadn't gotten a truly great story from the world of Disney Pixar probably since up in 2009 that wasn't a sequel. So that's a pretty tough thing to really think about. And the thing that I love the most about Coco is, yes, even though it is something that revolves around a Hispanic family, it's something that every family of every background can just relate to. I mean, the scene when they're all at the dinner table at the beginning and the grandmother says to Miguel, "You're too thin." I come from a Jewish family. You have no idea how many aunts and my grandmother who all say the exact same thing to me when I was a little kid. You can just relate to so many things regardless of what your background is, and that's what makes that movie truly special.
Yeah, I think they did a wonderful job of striking that balance of making it a story that you don't have to be from a particular background to enjoy, while also being, from what I've seen from reviews, and I know that they had like consultants on that movie, and the people who worked on that movie were talking about their own culture. So from what I've heard, that they did a really beautiful job of like showing that, like showing those holidays and showing that family and that background. And yeah, I think Disney did a wonderful job at that, because I think,
Absolutely.
yeah, kids are going to be able to see themselves in that movie. But it's also going to be like, it's also a wonderful story for people who don't have that same experience. And I think that's great.
Yeah, and I always say this to so many people. There's almost no Disney Pixar movie that I talk about when it comes to the colors. I think that the color palette that they use in that movie was gorgeous. It's one of
Yeah.
the most visually spectacular Pixar films. It's so beautiful to just look at. I'm sure that if you watch Coco and you just turn the volume off in that scene where he first shows up at the Land of the Dead, you don't need the sound. You just gaze at the beauty of what you're looking at. It's gorgeous.
Yeah,
Absolutely
it's
gorgeous.
beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. So, in regards to my favorite canon classic, that is something that has changed so many times throughout my life. I mean, I think for the longest time, my favorite Disney classic was Aladdin, and that's
Mhm.
just because of the fact that I'm a huge Robin Williams fan. But I am pretty certain, especially now that I have seen all the Disney Canon Classics and have reviewed them all, I would say that it still is Fantasia. Fantasia to me is my favorite just because it's unlike anything that is offered in that library minus Fantasia 2000. So, and also as someone who does actually have an appreciation for classical music, I love the blending of the music and animation, and the fact that, like I just said earlier, it's like when you take a look at a movie like Coco, if you just didn't have the dialogue, either if you have the score in there or if you just have the visuals, it just shows you how much something like that can speak to you. And the fact that Fantasia is a movie that can speak to you as well just through the power of music, that to me is what I think makes a fantastic Disney classic. But I also will give some honorable mentions. I also think that one of the most underappreciated classics is Treasure Planet. I also have been, every single time I watch The Great Mouse Detective, I just love it more and more. I think that movie has one of the best Disney villains. But there's so many great ones to speak of, but to me, it's definitely Fantasia. And for a long time, the same could be said about Pixar. My favorite has always been The Incredibles, but that's no longer the case. Right now, I will definitely say that my favorite Pixar film is Ratatouille.
Mm.
And it's so interesting because every single time I watch it, it just gets better and better. I find a new message. I find a new visual. I also just have such an urge. Every single time I finish watching that movie, I just want to go into my kitchen and try a new recipe because I am someone that does love to cook as well. So that's also a movie that I absolutely love. But after watching it this year, actually, I've learned so much more about the message that that movie was trying to send. And I also just love Brad Bird as a Pixar director. He's only done 3 of those films, but both Incredibles films and Ratatouille are 3 of the most beloved in the library. You know, I think that people who have not seen Ratatouille really need to go and see that movie, and they're going to be very impressed with what they see. So let's go into question number 3, and that is, how do you feel about what is sort of being called the semi-retirement of 2D animation? Do you feel that in this day and age, that animation style is still something that is relevant? Or because of the fact that 3D animation seems to be the more commonly used style of animation right now, is it just basically saying that we don't need 2D animation anymore?
Yeah, so I definitely think that the 3D or that style of animation has gotten a lot better. I remember when Meet the Robinsons came out,
Mm.
I hated, well, I wasn't a big fan of that movie anyway, but I also really didn't like the animation style. So I think it's nice that we're seeing a lot more development in that area. But I do kind of miss the 2D animation. I think that they can be beautiful in different ways. Like, I still think some of the animated canon classics that we were talking about, those are still beautiful to look at. They're different, but I think that they still have something that makes them special. And I kind of wouldn't be surprised, and I would like for this to happen, is for 2D animation to come back in a sense that it's going to be an artistic choice that people can choose to use or not use. Like, that's kind of how color or black and white movies were done. There was like a short period where you could kind of go between either. Like, one of my favorite movies is Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, and that was made in black and white, even at a time when most movies or a lot of movies were being made in color. I don't remember what year it was. And the director made the specific stylistic choice to shoot it in black and white because that was important for the story and important for how the story looked. And so that's kind of what I would like to see happen with 2D and other types of animation, is having it kind of in your toolbox. I would love to see more development go into 2D animation because I don't think its time is over. I would be sad if it was. I think that it still offers something. So yeah, it's maybe wishful thinking, but I would like to see it come back as an option. Like, not necessarily all movies being made in 2D, or like, I don't think that's going to happen, or even most movies, but I could see maybe Disney deciding to embrace that aesthetic almost for certain movies that they think calls for it. So that's kind of what I would like to see.
That's you bring up some really excellent points, and I'm definitely going to agree with you in regards to black and white films. I feel that there is just some kind of a timelessness factor to a black and white movie, and I also feel that when a current director decides to film their movie in black and white, I don't consider that a discredit. It's like I still hear people like, "Oh God, why is this movie in black and white?" I'm like, you don't understand. It's trying to capture something that is gone. I mean, think about the movie that won Best Picture in 2011, The Artist. Not only was it a black and white film, it was a silent movie.
Yeah.
You know, the fact that they tried to really capture something that is gone, or like one of the most iconic names in film, Charlie Chaplin. I just watched the movie Modern Times. It's one of the most well-known and most beloved films of all time. He made his film in black and white and made it a silent movie in a time when the talkie was mainstream. The fact that people were able to actually use that technology, but he says, no, I want to capture something in a simpler time, and that's what I feel. And I feel the same way about 2D animation because not necessarily about a simpler time, but I feel that when a 2D animated film is done, I just feel that there's a little bit more blood, sweat, and tears, more effort, more of a passion put into the skill set. Because don't get me wrong, the fact that we have the CG animation that we have now allows us to get so many more of these animated films done quicker and more efficiently because, you know, in Disney history, there was a time when you were literally waiting somewhere between 2 to 3, possibly even 4 years for the next animated classic to come out. But especially when Pixar hit its stride, you were getting a Pixar film every year, sometimes even 2 Pixar films a year. So I still will agree with you that 2D is something that we still should not just feel that it's dead. I mean, it's not just that. Look at Leica Studios and, of course, Tim Burton. They still believe in stop motion. And these stop motion films make so much of an impact for people. People love those recent stop motion films like Paranorman and Kubo and the Two Strings and The Missing Link. People love those movies. They make money. Kids go to see them. But
Yeah.
I still remember, it's funny that you mentioned Meet the Robinsons, because that was when Disney Animated Studios was trying to make its own grouping of CGI films, and yet the Disney resurgence, like after this real dark period, they come back with Princess and the Frog, and that just happens to be a 2D animated film, and it still makes a great deal of money, and it's still, to this day, one of the most beloved Disney princess films.
Yeah.
So I agree. I just don't feel that 2D animation is something that should be considered dead. I mean, believe it or not, last year, one of the highest grossing animated films was a 2D animated movie. It was Teen Titans Go to the Movies. It made over $50 million, which was way past the budget that it had. And people loved it. So I agree, 100%. 2D animation should definitely be something that sticks around, and definitely, you know, beyond the cartoon. I mean, I like the fact that we're still seeing 2D animation in cartoons on television, but I just don't want to make it feel like it's downgraded or anything like that, because it really shouldn't be.
And I mean, people love nostalgia. People love being a hipster and bringing things back. I wouldn't be surprised if we, like, in a couple decades, maybe, we hit this period of, like, I don't know, bringing back that 2D animation aesthetic almost.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because we're getting, like, a new age of Looney Tunes cartoons on HBO Max now, and in just about a month, I think Hulu is going to be premiering a new season of Animaniacs. So the fact that these classic cartoons are now coming back, 2D animation, of course, it's going to strike that nostalgia chord, because I agree with you. Nostalgia is something that is predominant in popular culture right now among all aspects. Everybody loves that nostalgia feel. They do. So let's talk about some of the recent events that's been going on with Disney. And this is actually something that is not necessarily considered so recent. I mean, it's been going on for a little over a decade now. And that is the fact that Disney has really been turning itself into a media empire. Like, it has been absorbing so many properties, though a lot of people are saying that today the empire has fallen, but again, that's going to be a little further down the line in today's conversation. But they have absorbed the Muppets, they've absorbed Star Wars, they've absorbed Marvel Entertainment, and just last year they acquired 20th Century Fox. So that's a lot of properties to have. Do you think that that is something that would considerably spread Disney a little too thin, or do you think that it's something that would only strengthen them?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to how much they're committed to maintaining the artistic vision of whatever they've acquired, and how much they want to kind of put their own spin on it. And I'm not saying either one of those is like completely the right way to go, but I think a big part of it comes down to how they're like they have so many resources, and I think they have the resources to really take into consideration the story they want to tell, and kind of like um I don't know, the integrity of what they're working on. Like with the recent Star Wars movies, they really didn't support John Boyega. I think they did really wrong by Kelly Marie Tran, and I think that they really need to be better about, like, I almost feel like they're listening to the fans too much. Actually, is kind of what it comes down to for me, at least right now. Um, and I really want to see them be better about that. Like, I mean, Kelly Marie Tran got bullied off of social media, basically. And I understand maybe Disney didn't feel like they could really like do anything about that if she didn't feel safe being on social media. But it's kind of hard to read their response as anything other than, well, she was barely in the movie that came out after that. Like, I don't remember when that happened, if it was the last one, which I still haven't seen. And so maybe I'm wrong and it's just based on plot synopsis, but like, she was barely in that movie. And I think that was a real mistake. I think she was a character a lot of people loved and latched onto. So I feel like my opinions on them, like expanding their media empire, is kind of colored by how they're interacting with the respective fandoms of these groups. Especially because Star Wars fandom and Marvel fandom can be kind of intense. I do wonder if they're spreading themselves a little thin and they're overcompensating by trying to please what they consider to be the core base of fans, which is the people who don't want things to change and everything. So I don't know if that answer was kind of what that question was what you were asking, but.
Well, to a degree, that's sort of the answer that you gave sort of spills into the next question. So we'll probably go a little further into that. But I have to say to a degree that I will disagree on a little bit of what you said in regards to them catering to the fans, because I would say some, including myself, would actually say it was quite the opposite when it came to Star Wars. So I'll just elaborate a little bit more. One of the few things that I have noticed is, if you want to get all of these properties and you want them to be successful, you've got to really allow them to stand on their own in your own conglomerate and just put a good management team behind it. I mean, look, Disney and Pixar, John Lasseter ran Pixar for a very long time, and he did a phenomenal job with Pixar. But he was then asked to be one of the main executives for the Disney Animation Studios in the mid-2000s, when, unfortunately, I would say after 2002, Disney's animated classics were just not what they used to be. I mean, you had movies like Brother Bear, Home on the Range, and Chicken Little. Those were three of what some call the worst Disney classics of all time. And when he finally saw what was happening in Disney Animation Studios, he goes, I got to pay more attention to this. So then, of course, Princess and the Frog comes out, Tangled comes out, and all the other great Disney movies after that come out. But he didn't really designate somebody on the Pixar end to keep the motor running on Pixar. And so Pixar's films started becoming all of these sequels, and they started to become a little bit mediocre. You know what I mean? And so then you take a look at the Marvel Studios. Kevin Feige, the Wonderkin, he's in charge of Marvel and Marvel only. And look at what he's done. All of Marvel Phase 1 was done with Paramount. So I think that's how it goes. So yeah, Kevin Feige takes the Marvel Studios. He's not attached to any other properties. He's not connected to Pixar. He's not connected to Star Wars. And he's just created a monster, an absolute monster in a great way. Star Wars is probably one of the most controversial things right now just because of the last three films. And I will say John Boyega is a good actor. I saw all three of these films, and I truthfully will say, as a Star Wars fan, they just didn't seem to be in the same vein as the original six. Now, it's funny because when episodes 1, 2, and 3 came out, people hated those. But that's a whole other topic for another time. Actually, that time has already passed. I've already done the Star Wars Sunday sit down earlier this year, so that's done with. But it was just a mess. I feel that they just weren't wise in who they chose to be the people who were in charge. It was really not the actors' faults. I don't think so. I think that the problem that happened with John Boyega and Kelly Marie Tran is because they were just put into a bad movie and they were given a bad group of things to work with. And that's the reason why they got the hate that they did. I mean, look, Disney is apologizing to Kelly Marie Tran like you wouldn't believe. I know that she's going to be in Raya and the Last Dragon, and I'm excited for that movie. I think she's going to do, I mean, it's Kelly Marie Tran and Awkwafina. How can you lose? I think the two of them are going to play off each other beautifully. But Kelly Marie Tran is going to be doing a lot of animation now. She's going to be doing a lot of voice work. And I'm sure she's going to get some more roles from other studios because I think that she has potential. I know John Boyega has tons of potential. I've been a fan of his ever since the Joe Cornish film Attack the Block came out. That was his first big screen debut movie, and he was great. They were just not used properly. And let's just get into the fifth question here. Let's talk about a little bit more of that controversy. So, we had the Star Wars franchise, we had the Twitter battles, and I feel that that was just a hot mess. Like, do you have any more to elaborate in regards to all of that?
I mean, I said a lot of what I thought in the previous question, but I just think it comes down to like Disney and corporations in general have to realize that if they're going to have a social media presence, which almost all brands do now, it means being more upfront about things than I think most companies are used to. It means adjusting. It means apologizing when they do something wrong, or when they don't support people enough, or when something turns out badly, or if they make a mistake. Like, it means that you have to, I think, react quicker, and you have to react honestly. So I really hope that going forward they're more cognizant of that, because I think that Disney has made good calls on that kind of thing in the past. They don't always do it right away, but like with the Princess and the Frog ride, how they're taking out the like Song of the South elements and they're turning Splash Mountain into Princess and the Frog. I think that's great. Princess and the Frog is a great movie. I love that movie. I think it deserves more of a presence in their parks, and I think it's nice that they're reevaluating some of the rides that really don't need to be tied to the properties that are like that. So yeah, I'd like to see more of that going forward. I'd like to see them better at responding to things like that. Like you said, they do seem to be handling Kelly Marie Tran's talent better better than they did with the Star Wars movie. So I'm happy to see that. So I think it comes down to like, they've made some good calls. They've also made some really bad ones, and I hope that they like continue to get better at that in the future. I think they really need to they just need to understand social media more. It's like they're gonna have an opinion on things, and people are going to want to know what that opinion is.
Right. And I want to elaborate a little bit more on what you were saying earlier about fandoms, because I truthfully feel that The Last Jedi was not something that appeased the fans. I think that was really a spit in the face to the fans. And you've seen The Last Jedi, yes or no?
Is that the last movie?
The last one was The Rise of Skywalker.
Okay. Last Jedi was the second movie, right? And
that was episode 8. That's correct.
Yes, and I did see that one. I did not enjoy that movie, so feel free to.
Yeah, because my wife and I, we're Star Wars fans. I mean, when I was younger, I was a Star Wars fanatic. I thought that they were some of the best movies that were ever made. But growing up, and actually thanks to YouTube, seeing movies for my Great Film Throwback Day, I have basically come to the conclusion that compared to some of these movies, Star Wars is a piece of crap. I don't think it's really some of the best movies ever at all. I mean, they're fun. they're big screen eye candy. I remember in 1997, during the 20th anniversary of the original trilogy, I went to the movie theaters and I saw the original trilogy in theaters. That was an amazing experience, even though I was literally sitting in my seat and quoting the movie under my breath, because I knew every moment. But, you know, I saw The Force Awakens. I was excited for the continuation of the Star Wars story. It was great to see Carrie Fisher and Harrison Ford back. I liked all the new characters. I thought J.J. Abrams gave me a fun film. It wasn't the best film I ever saw. I mean, now after everyone analyzing that film 6 ways from Sunday, they all basically called it Episode 4-2 Electric Boogaloo, which is really not a lie. It really is the exact same movie with different characters. Yeah. But The Last Jedi was slow. It was poorly acted. It just, the scenes with John Boyega and Kelly Marie Tran, the casino, just didn't seem the need to be there. Like, people were asking, why is it there? That it's not against those two actors. I want to make that clear. If they would have given them a better role and actually utilized them better, especially because of the 7th film, when Finn comes in, we are expecting big things from this character, and The Last Jedi, we get nothing. Absolutely nothing. And a lot of people also are very upset over the scene where we all thought he was actually going to die, and then Rose just pushes him out of the way. People were sort of saying we want him to die so that it would be like a redeeming factor for how poorly he was treated through the earlier portion of this movie. That's why a lot of people got even more upset about that. But no, that's basically what it was. The director made poor choices. He basically took everything that the fans wanted to see and basically said, yeah, you're not going to get any of that. I'm just going to screw with it and I'm just going to piss you off. That's basically what Rian Johnson did.
I feel like the first in the new series, like I thought that was a fun movie. It was very similar to previous Star Wars movies, but it was a good time. Yeah. And like I feel like that movie was one that really kind of played on nostalgia for fans of the series from all ages, really, because at this point, like, a lot of people have seen the original Star Wars movie, so it's not just for people who saw them in theaters or who saw them originally. But I feel like that movie, it was fun. I think you could enjoy it if you weren't a fan of the franchise, but it was really, I think, playing off a lot of that nostalgia for fans, which is fine. But then, like, the second movie, like, this was for nobody. Like,
absolutely.
Who did you intend to enjoy this movie? Because I feel like, I don't know if they were trying to split the difference of, like, you know, bringing in new fans of the series while also trying to please older fans. But like whatever they tried to do, I don't think it worked because nobody left that movie happy.
Yeah, I mean, look, I will say that we have gotten 5 brand new Star Wars movies, and I will still say the best of those 5 is Rogue One. I think Rogue One is a great film. It's very underappreciated by most people, but I do love it. But you also mentioned the fans, and here's one of the few things that I've been hearing a lot. I also do go onto social media a lot, and there was someone that I know that wrote a tweet recently about the comic book fan bases, and people say that these guys are very misogynistic, they're very, you know, they don't want change, etc., etc. Here's the thing that people need to understand about fan bases. There are certain characters that have been around for almost 100 years. You know, we know who they are, we know what they're supposed to be, we know what they're supposed to look like. Fans have no issue, especially when people are now talking about diversity and, you know, seeing representation of all kinds. Like, let's take 2 of the most well-known, most popular comic book heroes today in Marvel Comics. Let's take a look at the brand new Miss Marvel, Kamala Khan. And let's take a look at Miles Morales, Spider-Man. Nobody has anything against these characters. As a matter of fact, they're 2 of the most popular characters. Why? Because they are brand new characters. Because of the fact that they didn't take Peter Parker and they didn't take Carol Danvers and say, yeah, we're just going to kill these 2 off and this is going to be your new Spider-Man and Miss Marvel now. They didn't do that. We have another Miss Marvel and another Spider-Man, and they're going to be in the same universe as this Spider-Man and this Miss Marvel. Fans embrace that. I was completely cool with this. I think that Miles Morales is one of the best characters in Marvel Comics right now. But don't go and say, okay, Bruce Wayne is no longer going to be the white playboy. We're going to turn him into something completely different and completely new. That's where people get upset. Nobody has any issues with that girl, that woman, that wing, Signal, who are all, I mean, the Bat family right now is a very diverse group. There's people of color, there's women, there's young girls, there's young boys. So many different groups of people are now in the Bat family. Green Lantern. We still have Hal Jordan, but we have Jon Stewart, who is black. We have Kyle Rayner, who is half white, half Hispanic. We have Jessica Cruz, who is the first female human Green Lantern. We have Simon Baz, who is Arab. But they're in the world of the original. And there's so many different Green Lanterns now, so everyone can pick a favorite. That's where people need to understand the fandoms. We have no issues with getting new characters, but when you actually take a well-established character and change that character just for the sake of changing it, that's where people get a little upset. I don't know if you agree or disagree with that idea.
I don't feel like I have enough knowledge of comic book things in general, or for superhero movies for that matter, to have like a real like specific opinion about that. I think it's great if the fandoms are like kind of equally excited about the newer takes on the franchises.
Oh, very much so.
I think it also, a lot of it depends on people's individual experiences with fandom. Mine has not been the best necessarily, so I think that can sometimes like affect how I look at some of these things. But yeah, I mean, as somebody who's not in the comic book world or anything, I think that's great if that's how people are responding. I think that's really awesome that they're embracing these new stories. And I just saw Miles Morales a few days ago, and I loved it. So.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, like, well, then let's give you something a little bit more familiar. Let's talk about something that has been in the news very recently. The fact that Disney has announced a live-action Peter Pan, and Tinkerbell is going to be played by a black actress. There's some people that are embracing it, but then there are some people that are saying, why? I mean, Tinkerbell has always been this. You know, why are we suddenly changing her to look like this? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, like, I mean, we have to be able to relate to characters who don't look exactly like us, who don't have the same experiences. And people, like fans who are people of color, have been doing that for a long time. They've kind of had to put themselves into seeing white characters because they didn't have a lot of other options. So I think it's great that they're casting a black actress as Tinkerbell. Like Disney, obviously they're good at choosing talent, so I expect it to be a wonderful movie.
I hope so.
Yeah, I think that's great that they're starting to do that more.
Okay, and the other thing that we actually had to talk about in regards to the fifth question was also a lot of the other controversy that Disney has been dealing with is how they had been treating their employees at the parks. And that's something that was very, very strange for me, because that's something that I just never understood about large corporations, especially one like Disney, one that makes billions upon billions of dollars with every movie that they make, and yet you see these news stories of people who work at the theme parks and they're barely scraping together a living. I mean, unfortunately, that's not the situation right now. As unfortunately, at this point in time, it's a lot worse just because of what the pandemic has been doing. But I don't know about you, but I still am trying to wrap my head around the fact that these employees are being treated so unfairly.
Yeah, I know. It's really upsetting to see that. I remember a few years ago when that started coming out more. I'm sure that people have been talking about it for a while, but I wasn't like aware of it until like a few years ago. And I honestly, I think it's for a couple of reasons. For one thing, I think Disney knows they can get away with it, at least right now. Like, they're such a beloved franchise, and people feel so lucky to work at their parks, at least as like the character actors and that kind of like performance aspect. Like they're probably thinking like, I could fill your spot with one of a million other people. So they don't really have the incentive to take care of their employees. And I think it also comes down to like they have so much money and they still cut corners because it makes them more money. I mean, we see that with Amazon and Jeff Bezos. It's like there's no limit to how much money some people want to make, even if it's like they wouldn't even miss the money that they would expend if they decided to raise the wages of their workers, but they're not willing to do that. And yeah, I think it is really heartbreaking, especially for a company that prides itself supposedly on being about families and being about like a welcoming environment, and they tell these stories that are so like wonderful and have these wonderful themes and are, like we were talking about, they're important to people's childhood. So yeah, I also think it's really sad. I mean, it seems silly to say I hope they do better, because obviously I hope they do better, but maybe we'll eventually get to a point where they do feel an incentive to do something about that. But I agree, it's hard to reconcile what they're doing with the image that they project.
Yeah, especially when you take a look at a company like Microsoft, which did something that was exactly the opposite of what Disney did. When Microsoft was very much still in its infancy, Bill Gates decided to tell all the people at Microsoft, like I think it was around the time before Windows came out, or some big thing that Microsoft offered. He basically offered every single employee of the company stock options instead of Christmas bonuses one year, because he knew that he was going to be creating something that was going to revolutionize the world in regards to computing. And then it happens, and then there are pictures in the newspaper of one of the janitors of Microsoft standing in a parking lot right next to his Ferrari.
Yeah.
Think about that. And also, another person who was very much interested in something like that was George Lucas. He was not able to pay the people of this movie what people are making today, because look, they unfortunately had to spend a lot of money because they were doing something revolutionary in 1977, but he gave everybody the option for the merchandising. He said, get in on the merchandising because this is going to be huge. And there were some people that did it, and there were some people that just wanted the money.
Yeah.
And this is not even something that in regards to corporations, but listen to this funny story. Have you ever seen the 1978 film Animal House?
No.
Okay, it's one of the very first true teen comedies. I cannot recommend this enough. So, when they filmed Animal House, they went to the University of Oregon and they used a frat house for the movie. And yes, they trashed the frat house to no avail, because the movie is about an idiot group of people in a fraternity. It's a funny movie. It's one of the funniest movies ever made. And when the movie was done filming, they asked the fraternity who had the house, they said, you can have two things. We can give you some royalties for the film, or we could just build you a new house. The fraternity asked to have a new house. Bad idea. They could have had so much more money if they were just getting in on the movie, because Animal House is now known as one of the greatest teen comedies of all time. It's crazy when there's someone that just comes out to you with a good idea, and it's up to you to make that gamble. Yeah. Unfortunately, it's surprising to me that Disney doesn't really do something like that with their employees, because they know for a fact the next Disney animated classic, the next Marvel movie, the next Pixar movie, the next Star Wars movie, even if it's good, bad, or indifferent, it's going to make a killing in the box office. Yeah. I don't understand why Disney doesn't do that. Maybe it's and that's where I say, this is where I think the whole concept of buying all those properties has spread them so thin. They're spending so much money on so many things. I mean, before the pandemic, look at all the money that they were spending on their theme parks. The Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, the Guardians of the Galaxy roller coaster, the Ratatouille ride, that those two are coming to Epcot Center at some point, the new Toy Story wing of the Disney theme park of Hollywood Studios. This is the problem. I think they're just expanding far too quick and spending more money than they had coming in. And now they're seeing the aftershock of a pandemic, and it's killing them. So let's get into the sixth question. And I think this is something that I think we're going to have a great conversation with. And that is the Disney Canon Classic itself. There are remakes aplenty when it comes to these Disney Canon Classics. And The other thing that's very interesting is, of course, what's happening right now with Disney Plus, their new streaming service. And I will toot my own horn here and say, I told you all, I knew that this was going to happen the minute that all of these companies started doing their streaming services. They're pretty much backing people into a corner, basically saying, if you want to watch our movie, you have to be a subscriber for Disney Plus. The fact that Mulan unfortunately had to come out on streaming, and the fact that they offered $30 to unlock it early, and it failed miserably. But now, unfortunately, Soul is going straight to Disney Plus, and basically they're saying, if you want to see it, you have to subscribe to Disney Plus. What makes me even more nervous is the current CEO, Bob Chapek, who just recently took over because Bob Iger stepped down. He sort of made an announcement by saying that unless the movie is a canon classic, a Star Wars film, a Pixar film, or a Marvel film, we are not making any more physical copies of any of our new movies. So basically, every other movie that we make, you have to see it on Disney Plus. I mean, how do you feel about the fact that this is what Disney is doing? One, by basically taking some of their most beloved movies and making these live-action remakes, which so many people are basically saying, enough, we don't want them anymore. And how do you feel about this whole new thing with Disney Plus and their possible abandonment of physical media, basically forcing people to buy into their new product?
Yeah. Yeah, so as far as the live action remakes, I kind of take them on a case by case basis. Like I
As do
don't
I.
have, yeah, like I don't necessarily have like a stance, like I'm against them or I'm for them. Like I loved the Beauty and the Beast live action. I know a lot of people hated that movie. And
Yeah.
I was talking about the animated one being my favorite Disney Canon Classic. So I obviously love the original, but I love them in different ways. Like to me, it doesn't take anything away from the original to get to see the live action one. I thought it was well cast. I thought it was pretty to look at. I thought the music they added was actually pretty good. I really enjoyed that movie. And I think that where I have maybe like an issue, if you could call it that, is with some of the choices they're making about which movies to make live action. Like, I think Lion King was a strange choice. Like, who watches The Lion King and is like, I want to see these animals die in better animation? Like,
And why is it getting a sequel?
right. And like, not to mention the fact that when you're animating animals, it's not even a live action remake, but like it was sort of, I guess they were kind of seeing it as like a live action remake or like a closer to live action remake. So I don't really have like a problem with them remaking some of their classic movies. Like I have different feelings on them. Like I didn't really like the Cinderella one, but like I said, I loved the Beauty and the Beast one. So I think it comes down to which movies they're choosing to do it with, and also that they continue to make more original properties as well. Because with the way I see it, it's not hurting any of their movies coming forward, any of their newer ideas to revisit some of their old ones. Like, yeah, you could, it's kind of a money grab in some ways. Um, but like Disney, at least during normal times, they have so many resources that they can afford to easily remake some movies and at the same time devote time and energy to new projects. So it doesn't really bother me. I admit that the latest, like some of the latest like live action ones that they've been making, like the Jungle Book, I don't necessarily see why they chose to do that one either, because again, it's like you're still animating the animals. But anyway, so yeah, kind of like mixed feelings on that. And then as far as the Disney Plus thing, that does disappoint me. And to plug our other project that we did with Taylor, when
Yes.
we were talking about digital versus physical media, a lot of what we said came down to it's nice to have options. And I think that's what they're losing by like forcing people not only to pay for their service to see things, but to force people to watch something digitally. I think that's a mistake, and it's kind of unnecessary. Like I don't know if they're worried about losing money on the physical copies. Like maybe they have been not selling as well, but I feel like you're always going to have a section of your fan base who wants to have a physical copy of what you make. And so I don't know. I think they're kind of trying to be so on the cutting edge that they're maybe giving things that people don't necessarily need right now. Like, I don't know, I'm disappointed that there's going to be movies they come out with that you can't buy, and that seems like such a weird thing. Like, why would you not have your movies in as many formats as possible? So yeah, I think it's
Exactly.
weird.
Yeah, and it's so funny. Everything that you just said, I'm literally the exact opposite with you in regards to the Disney remakes. Cinderella and The Jungle Book were two of the remakes that I actually liked. And the reason why was because of the fact that they took two films that they're loved by many people, but there is a lot of ways that you can improve on the story itself. I thought that Cinderella was wonderful. First of all, because I'm a huge fan of Kenneth Branagh as a director. I love Kenneth Branagh as a director. This was the first movie that I saw Lily James in, and I thought that she was phenomenal. Kate Blanchett as Lady Tremaine, what a genius choice to cast her. And I loved that they added so much to the story. I like that they gave the stepmother a backstory. I love that they actually built a relationship between Cinderella and the prince, because there is no buildup of the relationship in the film itself in the animated classic in 1950. So I think that they did a little bit more. In Jungle Book, I love that they gave Shere Khan a little bit more of a screen presence, because when people think of the Jungle Book, yes, they think of Shere Khan, but if you actually watch the movie, the 1967 movie, he's barely in it. It's weird. And getting him in the movie, and of course having Idris Elba, the wonderful piece of work that he is, to actually voice Shere Khan was a beautiful idea. And I don't care what anybody says, but I thought having Christopher Walken as King Louis singing the song made me laugh so hard. But it made me laugh even harder when Mowgli actually was looking at King Louis's hoard of goodies, and he actually picked up a cowbell. For all you Saturday Night Live fans, that's your reference right there. Christopher Walken cowbell, just too funny. Beauty and the Beast, my wife and I went to see it, and we just didn't understand why it was needed, because you can't, how do you build on perfection? Seriously, how do you do it? However, I will agree with you on the songs. I thought that the additional songs were wonderful, and I loved what they added in regards to Belle and her mother. I did like that. But I just felt that there was nothing really that was needed. I had no interest in seeing the live action Aladdin. I had no interest in seeing Mulan until the point when there was literally going to be nothing to see in movie theaters, but there was a possibility that that was going to be in theaters. So I said to my wife, I think I'll go and see Mulan because there's nothing else to see. I liked Christopher Robin. I thought it was really cute to give us a continuation of the story of Winnie the Pooh, sort of what they did in 1991 with Steven Spielberg's Hook. You see, if you want a recreation of Peter Pan, you go to the 91 film Hook. That's such an amazing movie. Hook is just, have you ever seen that, by the way?
I don't think so.
Oh, God. Robin Williams as Peter Pan, Dustin Hoffman as Captain Hook. What a movie. That is one of Steven Spielberg's greatest films. It is awesome. So, so awesome. I can't recommend it enough. But yeah, I just am somebody, and you know this because clearly, thank you so much for bringing up our conversation with Taylor. I wanted to fit it in here somewhere, so bravo. I appreciate that to a great avail. Yeah, I mean, do I have streaming services? Yes, I do. I actually just got HBO Max, but I got it for free because my cable provider gives me the option, if I'm already subscribed to HBO, all you got to do is just create an account with your cable provider login, and you get HBO Max for free. So I have it for free. It's an additional thing to enjoy. And I'm actually taking full advantage of it because now I'm actually watching some television shows that I've never watched before that are actually on HBO Max. But I know that Warner Brothers, their big announcement was the fact that HBO Max was going to feature Justice League the Snyder Cut, the 5-hour-long version of Justice League that everyone's been craving, and I'm one of them. But I know for a solid fact that the minute that movie hits HBO Max, give it another 90 days, and there will be a physical copy in retail all across the globe. People will buy that physical copy, no doubt in my mind. And I am just upset with the fact that this is what Disney is doing with all the properties that they got with 20th Century Fox. Like, they got so many amazing franchises, and now they just want to take each and every one of them and make their own versions. Like, they want to make a remake of Home Alone. Why? Why? That's like spitting on the grave of John Hughes, for crying out loud. I mean, say what you will about Macaulay Culkin, but seriously, nobody knows what they're going to do with Alien and Predator. Nobody knows what they're going to do with all these Fox properties. Like, they're actually willing to put the movies that have been made by 20th Century Fox into movie theaters for the sake of them believing that they're going to bomb, only because of the fact that nobody's going to go and see them in movie theaters. And then they're going to go on to Disney Plus. They'll never come out on physical media. I think that that is such a disservice. And I hate to say it, but as someone who has been a Disney fan, I mean, look, I don't need Disney Plus. I've got Disney Plus right behind me. Those are all my Disney DVDs. I don't need Disney Plus. I've got all the Star Wars, all the MCU DVDs. They're all here. That's my Disney Plus. I want them to literally crash and burn right now. I want them to really see fans of so many different franchises rise up and say, you're screwing us. Disney's not a stupid group of people. I mean, everybody knows that if you give people the opportunity to have a physical copy, there is no doubt in my mind that people are going to buy it. People who say, there are people that say, oh, I've cut my cable, I'll download everything, I'll stream everything. But there's still so many people that collect. People like to have a physical copy. People like books. People like DVDs. People like CDs and vinyl records and collectibles. There are so many people out there that still collect physical media. And everyone who seriously feels that physical media is dying, I don't agree. I really don't. So that's going to basically bring us to the last question, and that is, based on everything that we've discussed, and we've covered a lot of ground today, do you feel, especially during the current circumstances, that Disney might in fact be in trouble due to the fact that it's done all of the acquiring of all of these franchises, the fact that the pandemic has basically put them in the spotlight, showing how much they've had to do, how many people they've had to lay off, how many times they've had to downgrade things? Do you see a possible saving grace for Disney in the new future? Like, what do you think might be the next big thing that is going to bring Disney back to the glory days? Is it going to be a new series of Disney Canon Classics? Is it going to be a new series of Pixar films? Is it going to be, God forbid, another acquiring of a franchise? Like, what do you think is going to happen to Disney in the coming years, especially because, I'm sorry to be a little bit long-winded here, but let's also remember, we're going to get a vaccine one day, hopefully sooner than later, and yes, things will go back to normal. So where do you see Disney as far as its future, based on where we are right now?
Yeah, so I think Disney has proven itself a very resilient company and very adaptable in some ways. I think they obviously are getting hard hit right now. I kind of do expect like a new series of Canon Classics to kind of be the story of their comeback. That's what I would like to see. But I think that they have, even with all of the acquiring of other properties they're doing, I think they're pretty good at kind of figuring out the entertainment that people want to see. Aside from a few missteps, and like we were saying with Disney Plus, I don't know if that's going to be like a miscalculation from them or what, but I definitely think a lot of people are not as excited about it as Disney hoped people would be. Not like easing back on the properties they've acquired, but maybe trying, like, making them more independent subsidiaries of them, like putting specific people in charge who know the properties, who know what they want to do with it, and kind of letting them do their own thing. Because like we were talking about earlier, I do kind of feel like Disney is spreading itself too thin. I think they haven't really made up their mind about how Disney they want everything to feel, even if it's not.
That's a good way to say it. I like that.
Yeah, like I think they haven't made up their mind about that. And something else that I would love to see as we slowly start to return to normal life, whenever that happens, is I would really love to see them put more resources into their Broadway presence. Like I'm a theater lover. I think Disney has done some amazing musicals. I actually got to see the world premiere of Hunchback of Notre Dame that they did. That was like the tryout, and it was supposed to go to Broadway, and it never did. And I think a big reason for that is that it really, the way they did that show, it really didn't fit with kind of the brand image of Disney, because it was a lot darker than the animated movie. It wasn't quite as depressing as the novel, from what I've heard. But I think they need to, that's kind of another case where they need to make up their mind about, do they want to have one consistent image, or do they want to kind of let things stand on their own a little bit more? And especially with theater hurting so much right now, I would really, really love to see Disney put some energy and put some resources and their incredible talent pool that they have into doing that, into even coming up with original ideas for shows, or at least putting ones on stage that will feel different, that they can do different things with. Because I thought Hunchback was a brilliant production. I think they did a lot of really interesting things with the parts they chose to keep the same, or the parts they chose to change. So that's one thing that I would really love to see from them going forward, is just embracing the different areas that they're already involved with, like really committing to those.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good way to go. I mean, look, when it comes to people who have actually gotten their subscriptions of Disney Plus, one of the most viewed things they have on there, obviously, is Hamilton.
Yep.
And I had to admit, I actually watched it, and it just wasn't my cup of tea. I'm sorry, everybody. I was not a fan. I like the music, but it's like me and Les Mis. Just give me the music, and I'll be in heaven. I don't need to see the show. The music is exactly wonderful, just how it is. I love Lin-Manuel Miranda. I love the songs. I really, really do. But I think that we just have to get back to normal right now. I mean, unfortunately, Broadway's lights are now off until June of next year, and it's really sad, which is also one of the main reasons why I hope the vaccine comes sooner than later, because I feel that once it comes, I just hope the skepticism is gone and people will actually be willing to actually get in line to get a shot, because we need these things back. I mean, Disney's got some wonderful ideas in the works. I already know what's being offered in the Canon Classics and Pixar. There's going to be a very interesting film from Pixar called Luca coming. It's about two kids in the southern Italian countryside that actually befriend a sea creature, which sounds really wonderful. Raya and the Last Dragon sounds wonderful. And right after that, we're going to be getting the 60th Disney animated classic, which sounds so amazing. And it's going to be about a family of Latin American people who live in a village where they all have special powers, and the daughter of this family doesn't have them. The movie's called Encanto. It sounds wonderful. I'm excited. And I'm also, of course, very excited for the next phase of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because now that they did, the best thing about getting Fox was the fact that they now finally have X-Men and they finally have the Fantastic Four, because those two franchises need to be in the MCU. There was so much news about Spider-Man and the next Spider-Man movie, and everyone is so excited because we're going to be seeing the multiverse. There are rumors that Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield are coming back for this movie. Like, how could you not be more excited to see, like, 3 different Spider-Man, and maybe even a tease of Miles Morales, which is something a lot of people are excited for as well. So there's a lot of good things coming. I mean, the other thing that I didn't get to mention is it also is still so weird that Disney now owns The Simpsons and Family Guy. I'm still trying to wrap my head around that, and that's the one set of franchises that I just don't want Disney to ruin. I don't know how Matt Groening feels about it. I don't know how Seth MacFarlane feels about being part of the Disney conglomerate. I really, really don't. But The Simpsons is one of the most popular things being watched on Disney Plus right now. I mean, I know that I've been saying so many horrible things about Disney Plus, but God willing, there will be a little one running around in my room right now one day, and that is when my wife and I will get Disney Plus, because clearly we need the child to be exposed to as much Disney as possible, and there's only so much that my DVD library can do because we don't have any of the TV shows, and I would like a child of mine somewhere in the future to see all those amazing Disney shows like the Disney Afternoon, DuckTales, Rescue Rangers, Gummy Bears, all those great classic shows. So I truthfully feel that this is going to be a learning experience for everybody in the world of entertainment. The only thing that makes me nervous is what's happening right now with theaters, because I really want people to feel comfortable going back into theaters, because one of the few things that people need to understand is if it ends up where theaters unfortunately are going to go extinct, which I don't think is going to happen, then movies are going to be made with half the budgets that they're being made with now. They're going to unfortunately have to downgrade the production value. I mean, I've been saying for years that actors are getting paid way too much for what they do. They should have taken a pay cut regardless of the pandemic or not, but people are going to see a lot less money put into movies, because if it's all going to be just streaming, people are not going to want to pay those kinds of prices. You know, that's what I'm saying. And you've got to have the movie theaters in order for people to sit down and watch these movies and give you their money. That's the only way to make a lot of money in such a short amount of time. Streaming, I just don't think is the future. I really don't.
Yeah, I think they're making the responsible choice with keeping things closed, obviously until we have a vaccine and everything. This whole thing with theaters going through so much, the movie industry not doing well, I think it's part of it is like we just don't value the arts enough, and in times of crisis it's one of the first things to go. That's where budget cuts happen, and it makes me really sad. And I think the fact that people right now, like, we're so, I don't want to say dependent on media, but I think for a lot of us, one of the things that is kind of getting us through is storytelling.
Yeah.
I really hope that when it's safe, we come out of this and we realize how important those things are, and that we support them more.
Yeah, well, I think what's really strange is when it comes to movie theaters being closed, there's only 2 states in which movie theaters are still closed. And ironically, they happen to be the 2 states that you and I respectfully live in. And they also happen to be the places where movies make the most money. I mean, you probably don't know this, but theater companies are suing the state of New York, because they're basically saying, why are we the only ones that are closed right now? People can actually, in New York, they can cross the bridge to Jersey, they can drive up north to Connecticut, and they can go see a movie in theaters now if they really had the time and efforts to do so. I mean, I can understand places like New York City and Los Angeles and San Francisco, the populated cities, but that's not all of California. That's not all of New York. Where I live right now, it's a much safer place. I mean, yes, has the disease upticked a little bit in where I live right now? I live 40 miles away from New York City. Yes, we've seen some upticks, but they're very, very small compared to what's happening right now with the surge and the clusters forming in the 5 boroughs, because there's just so many people there. You know, it's like, the only reason why there are some small upticks is just because of the fact that people are sending their kids back to school, and people are basically being told you got to come back to the office now. So yeah, of course you're going to see some numbers increasing, but you're going to see numbers increase a lot less in certain places than others where there's a lot less of a populace. And when Governor Cuomo over here in New York in the midsummer allowed certain shopping malls to open, they said, if you have these air filtration systems in your AC systems, then yes, it's more safer. But here's the thing. Some of these malls have movie theaters in their complexes. They use those exact same filtration systems. So why are you not opening up those movie theaters, if anything? I mean,
well, and also they're finding, like, the circulation is not always, the way it's done is not always a good thing. So yeah, it's hard because obviously I'm very in favor of the arts, but I'm more in favor of keeping people safe.
Of
And
course.
I'm sure that some of this is overkill, but my area in California, we actually just barely came out of the purple zone, which is past red. It's like you can't do anything because people are dying, and getting sick. So yeah, it's difficult. I would always rather them err on the side of caution, but I think we wouldn't be having this dilemma if there were more support for the arts in general, especially things like live theater, because
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, people like to pay lip service to how important it is, but when it's time to actually fund them or, take care of them, support them in some way, it doesn't always happen. So
Yeah. Well, I think that all we have to do right now is just, we have to just continue doing what we've been doing ever since COVID-19 arrived on the U.S. shores. We unfortunately just have to take it one day at a time and do our very best to follow the rules that have been put in place. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think that that's going to wrap it up for today. Cara, I just want to say thank you so much for joining me. This was a fantastic conversation. So glad that you were able to join me and give me your 2 cents and your overall thoughts about Disney and everything that is a part of the Disney empire. And I'm just hoping that Disney will manage to find its footing once everything gets back to some kind of a normal. You know what I mean?
yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed this.
Oh, it was a pleasure. It was a long time coming, and I'm glad that we managed to do that because, as Disney always says, your dreams do come true. So,
That's right.
ladies and gentlemen, once again, thank you all for joining us today. I'm so glad that you were here, and I'm looking forward to another episode of Sunday Sit Down, the second to last episode of Sunday Sit Down, where we will have another great topic to discuss, but most importantly, a brand new awesome YouTuber to discuss it with. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Hey, thank you so much for stopping by my channel today. If you're new here and want to see more of what my channel has to offer, please click on the link to my last video or hit that subscribe button to be kept up to date with all of my uploads. Content of all sorts is posted here quite often, so trust me, you do not want to fall behind. I will see you in the comments, and actions speak louder than words.